There is a moment almost everyone in the US knows, even if nobody talks about it out loud. It is the moment you open your banking app, not because you need to buy anything, but just to look. You are not checking a number, you are checking a feeling. And most of the time, the feeling that comes back is a small, quiet unease. Because you cannot actually tell anyone, including yourself, where last month's paycheck went. Not the big stuff, not rent, not the car payment. Those you know. It is the rest of it. The $11 here, the $40 there, the subscription you forgot you were paying for. That adds up into a fog. And that fog is the reason so many people who earn a decent living still feel broke by the 15th of the month. This is the story of one couple who lived inside that fog for almost a decade, and the 6 words that pulled them out of it. Not a new job, not a raise, not a lottery ticket. 6 words, scrawled on a napkin at a diner outside Columbus, New York, by a woman they had just met an hour earlier. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why that sentence has quietly rebuilt more bank accounts and more marriages than almost any other idea in personal finance. And more than that, you are going to walk away with the exact steps to start doing this yourself, tonight, with the paycheck you already have. Before we go further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Their names were Marcus and Renee Whitfield. He was an electrician, working steady jobs around central Ohio. She taught 4th grade at a public school a few miles from their rented duplex. Combined, they brought home a little over $80,000 a year, which by most measures should have felt comfortable. It did not feel comfortable. It felt like running on a treadmill someone kept quietly speeding up. Neither of them was reckless with money. They did not gamble it away or blow it on things they could not afford. They simply never knew, at any given moment, exactly how much of it was actually theirs to spend. Their system, if you could call it that, was the same system most Americans run without ever choosing it on purpose. Paycheck lands. Bills get paid, more or less on time. Whatever is left sits in the checking account like a puddle, and the puddle gets spent on whatever shows up. Dinner out, a new pair of work boots, a birthday gift, until the puddle is gone and the whole thing starts over. They had a savings account, technically. It had $400 in it, and it had had roughly $400 in it for the better part of 3 years, because anything that accumulated in checking eventually found a reason to leave. If any of that sounds familiar, you are far from alone, and that is not a guess, it is the data. Close to half of all working Americans today describe themselves as living paycheck to paycheck, meaning the gap between what comes in and what goes out is thin enough that one bad month could tip the whole thing over. That number has actually improved in the last year, but for a long stretch it sat far higher, with roughly 2 out of every 3 adults in this country saying the exact same thing Marcus and Renee would have said if you had asked them back then. You are not bad with money because you feel this way. You are behaving exactly the way an unstructured system trains you to behave. Keep that sentence in your head, because everything in this video is really just one long answer to it. The night that changed things for them started as nothing special. They were driving back from Renee's sister's place in Dayton, and they stopped at a roadside diner off Route 4 because Renee wanted pie and Marcus wanted coffee that did not taste like it had been sitting since breakfast. The booth behind them was occupied by an older woman, maybe 60, wearing a flannel jacket, working through a crossword and a cup of black coffee, with the patience of someone in absolutely no hurry to be anywhere else. Renee, who has never in her life met a stranger she could not talk to, struck up a conversation about the weather, which turned into a conversation about work, which turned into a conversation about money, the way honest conversations sometimes do late at night in a diner booth when nobody is performing for anybody. The woman's name was Carol. She had spent 31 years as a bookkeeper for a small manufacturing company outside the city, and when Renee, half joking, said something about how she wished money just made sense, Carol set down her pencil and asked a question neither of them had ever really considered. She asked, When your paycheck hits your account, does every single dollar in it already know what it is for? Marcus laughed because he thought she was joking. She was not. She flipped her napkin over, borrowed Renee's pen, and wrote out 6 words. Give every dollar a job. That napkin ended up on their refrigerator for the next 4 years. Here is the first thing you can actually start tonight, straight from that napkin. Before you plan how to spend anything, write down every dollar you expect this pay period, and next to it, write what job that dollar is doing. Not a vague category, an actual job. Not extra money, but flat tire fund. Not leftover, but Friday night dinner. A dollar with no job is a dollar that will find one on its own, and it is never the job you would have picked for it. What Carol described that night, without ever using the technical term for it, is what financial professionals call zero-based budgeting. It is not new, and it is not some influencer trend. It was first developed in the corporate world back in 1969 by a manager named Peter Peer, who wanted every department at his company to justify every dollar of spending from scratch, instead of just carrying last year's budget forward out of habit. The idea eventually made its way into personal finance, and it has become one of the most quietly effective tools regular families use to stop feeling like their money has a mind of its own. The mechanics are almost insultingly simple, and that simplicity is the entire point. At the start of every pay period, you take your income and assign every dollar of it a specific job before you spend a single cent of it. Rent gets a job, groceries get a job, the electric bill gets a job, and so does your emergency fund, and so does retirement, and so does the trip you have been putting off for 3 years. When you finish assigning jobs, income minus every single one of those jobs should land on exactly 0. Not because you spent it all, but because every dollar, including the dollars going into savings, has already been given somewhere to go. 0 does not mean broke. 0 means nothing is left drifting. Lesson 2, and you can do this one this weekend. Sit down with your last paycheck and your last bank statement and build a simple list of every job your money needs to do. Start with the non-negotiables: housing, utilities, groceries, transportation. Then add a line that has probably never existed in your budget before: an emergency cushion, even a small one. Then, and this part matters more than people think, add one line that exists purely so you can enjoy your own money without guilt. Carol told Marcus and Renee, months later, that a budget with no room for joy in it never survives past the 3rd month, because people quietly rebel against systems that only ever say no. Marcus and Renee did not transform their finances overnight, and if a video ever tells you otherwise, be suspicious of it. What they did was small and almost embarrassingly simple. The Sunday after that diner conversation, they sat at their kitchen table with a laptop and a legal pad, and wrote down every dollar they expected in the next 2 weeks. Then they wrote down every job that dollar could possibly need to cover: rent, electric, groceries, gas for the truck, Renee's classroom supplies she had been quietly paying for out of pocket, and then, for the first time in their marriage, 2 new categories that had never existed before: an emergency cushion, and something Renee named, half joking, the So We Don't Kill Each Other Fund, a small, guilt-free allowance for each of them. They assigned every incoming dollar a job. When the math did not land on 0 the first time, and it did not, they moved dollars between categories until it did. Nothing got deleted, nothing got judged. A dollar just moved from one job to a more urgent one, the same way you would pull an employee off a slow project to go help with a fire somewhere else in the building. Lesson 3. When your budget doesn't balance, move money, don't panic. The number not landing on 0 the first time is not failure. It is normal. The fix is never to abandon the system. The fix is to shift dollars from a lower priority job to a higher priority one until the math works. This is the single habit that keeps people from quitting in week 2. The first 2 weeks felt strange, almost uncomfortable, the way any new structure feels before it becomes familiar. Marcus caught himself, more than once, wanting to buy something small and automatically reaching for the checking account the old way, the way where nothing had a name attached to it. Each time he had to stop and ask a new question. Which job does this come from? Some weeks the honest answer was fine, take it from the "so we don't kill each other" fund. Other weeks the honest answer was, it does not have a job right now, which meant it waited. By the second month, something had shifted that neither of them expected, and it was not really about the money yet. It was about the arguing. Renee later told her sister that she and Marcus had stopped having the same 4 a.m. fight about money they had been having, on and off, for 6 years. Not because they suddenly agreed on everything, but because the decisions had already been made, together, on a calm Sunday afternoon, instead of in the heat of a moment when the checking account looked scarier than it should have. This lines up with something the research on this method shows again and again. NAB, the budgeting tool built specifically around the zero-based approach, reports that its typical new user saves around $600 in their first 2 months, and more than $6,000 over their first year. Not because the app is magic, but because giving every dollar a job forces a level of intention a loose mental budget simply cannot match. When more than 9 out of 10 of that app's users report feeling less stressed about money after adopting the method, that is not a coincidence. Structure is not the enemy of freedom, in money or almost anywhere else. Structure is usually what freedom is quietly standing on. By month 4, Marcus and Renee had their first real emergency cushion, just over $1,100, sitting untouched in a separate account they had named, with Carol's advice ringing in their ears, something specific rather than something forgettable. They called it the flat tire fund, because that was exactly the kind of expense that used to derail them every single time. And sure enough, in June, Marcus's truck threw a belt on the way to a job site. The repair cost $310. For the first time in years, that number did not feel like a crisis. It felt like a job that money had already been assigned to do, finally doing it. Lesson 4. Name your account something specific, not something generic. Savings does not mean anything to your brain. Flat tire fund does. When money is about to leave an account with a real name and a real purpose attached, people hesitate to rate it in a way they never hesitate with a nameless pile of cash. This costs nothing to set up, and it works almost every time. About a year in, life did what life always does, and it stopped cooperating with the plan on paper. Winter slowed down outdoor electrical work, and some months Marcus brought home hundreds of dollars less than the budget assumed. This is usually the exact point where people quietly give up on budgeting altogether and slide back into the fog, telling themselves the system just does not work for people like them. Carol had one more piece of advice waiting for exactly this moment. She told them zero-based budgeting is not one rigid number. It is a rule about intention, and intention can bend with a variable paycheck the same way it bends with a steady one. Lesson 5, and this is the one that saves the whole system when income isn't steady. Instead of assigning a fixed dollar amount to every job, assign a percentage of whatever comes in. A slice for the flat tire fund, a slice for retirement, a slice for bills. On a strong week, every job gets fully funded with extra left over. On a lean week, every job still gets something, just a smaller portion, and nothing breaks. The goal was never a perfect number. The goal was a decision made once, in advance, instead of 50 separate times under pressure. There is a reason this actually works underneath the surface, and understanding it is what makes the habit stick long after the motivation from any video wears off. Every decision drains a small amount of mental energy, and money decisions drain more than most, because they carry fear attached to safety. A loose budget asks you to make the same decision again and again, every time money moves. Do I really need this? Can I afford this? Should I wait? Zero-based budgeting takes that exhausting, repeated negotiation and moves it to one single sitting, once every pay period, when you are calm and clear-headed, instead of standing in a checkout line, being asked to decide in 3 seconds. You are not eliminating decisions, You are relocating them to the moment you are best equipped to make them well. There is also a quieter shift both Marcus and Renee noticed the longer they did this. The question changes. On the old system, the question after every purchase was, "Did I overspend?" That question only shows up after the money is already gone, which means it can only ever produce guilt, never prevention. On a zero-based system, the question becomes, which job does this come from? That question shows up before the money moves, which means it can actually change the outcome instead of just narrating it afterward with regret. Lesson 6. Change the question you ask yourself. Not did I overspend, but which job is this coming from? One question happens too late to help you. The other happens early enough to matter. None of this required them to earn more money before starting, and that matters, because the most common excuse for not doing this is some version of, "I do not have enough income for a real budget to matter." Carol's answer to that was blunt. The method does not care how many dollars you have. It cares whether the ones you do have are working for you or just wandering around unsupervised. Plenty of households earning well over $100,000 a year report the exact same paycheck-to-paycheck feeling as households earning half that, and the reason is almost never that the income itself was too low. It is that the income never had a plan. There is one more piece of this that deserves real attention, because it is the piece most people skip, and it is the piece that turns a good habit into a genuinely life-changing one. In a true zero-based system, there is no leftover, because even your future gets a job. This is where the emergency cushion Marcus and Renee built started talking to a second job, retirement, and eventually a third, an actual goal, a vacation, a down payment, whatever used to feel impossibly far away because there was never a dedicated dollar moving toward it. Marcus started putting a small, unglamorous $90 a month into a retirement account through his union, money that would have simply blended into the fog 2 years earlier. Run at even a modest long-term market return, $90 a month, showing up without fail for 30 years, turns into a genuinely significant sum, not because $90 is impressive on its own, but because it never stops and it never gets forgotten. It has a job, and it shows up to do that job every single month, whether Marcus is thinking about it or not. Lesson 7. Give your future a job too, even a small one. A tiny automatic amount into retirement or savings, repeated without fail for years, will outperform an occasional heroic deposit almost every time. The size of the amount matters far less than whether it actually shows up every single month. By the 2-year mark, the numbers had changed enough that even Marcus's father, a man not exactly known for handing out compliments about money, noticed something different. Marcus and Renee had over $6,000 in their flat tire fund, now genuinely large enough to survive a real emergency rather than just a minor one. They had started, for the first time in their marriage, an actual vacation fund, named simply Gulf Shores, after the Alabama beach town they had always talked about visiting and never quite managed to afford. And critically, according to both of them, the 4 a.m. arguments about money were essentially gone. Not because either of them had become a different person, but because the decisions had already been made, calmly, on a Sunday, by two people who were not tired, not scared, and not staring at a number that felt out of control. Renee has a line she says now, whenever a friend from work asks how they turned things around so completely. "We didn't start making more money, we just stopped letting our money make its own decisions." Carol still gets a Christmas card from Marcus and Renee every year, along with a handwritten update on the flat tire fund balance, which has become something of a running joke between the three of them. She never asked for anything in return for that napkin. She has said, more than once, that the reason she wrote those 6 words down that night is because someone did the exact same thing for her. On a similar napkin, back in 1994, when she was a young bookkeeper who could not make her own numbers add up either. Good financial habits, it turns out, travel the same way good recipes do: one napkin, one conversation, one person willing to pass it along, at a time. So here is the 6-word idea this entire story has been circling since the beginning. Give every dollar a job. Not because it sounds clever on a napkin, but because a dollar without a purpose does not sit still waiting patiently for you to decide what it is for. It goes looking for a job on its own, and it almost always picks the wrong one. Let's put every lesson from tonight in one place, so you can actually use it this week. 1. Write down every dollar you expect this pay period, and give each one an actual named job, not a vague category. 2. Do this before you spend, not after, ideally the same day your paycheck lands. 3. If the math doesn't land on zero the first time, don't panic. Just move dollars between jobs until it does. 4. Name your savings account something specific and personal, not something generic, because specific names protect money that generic ones don't. 5. If your income isn't steady, assign percentages instead of fixed amounts, so the system bends without breaking. 6. Catch yourself asking the old question, did I overspend? And replace it with the new one, which job does this come from? And 7. Give even a small piece of every paycheck a job in your future, because a small amount that never misses a month will outwork a large amount that only shows up occasionally. None of this requires an app, though tools exist if you want one, and none of it requires you to earn a single extra dollar before you begin. It requires one sitting, this week, ideally right after your next paycheck lands, while the number is still fresh in your mind. When the math lands on zero, you are not out of money. You are, for maybe the first time, actually in charge of it. So tell me honestly in the comments, right now, does every dollar in your account already have a job? Or is some of it still wandering around waiting to find one on its own? What would you name your flat tire fund if you started one tonight? And if this story hit close to home, stick around, subscribe, and tell us what part of your money life feels the most out of control right now, because that is exactly what the next video is going to help you fix.